We have dry season updates from the WRMA and Wasco. We also have raw water pipeline repairs updates and our project updates as well from Wasco. And then, of course, we will open to your questions. And I know you do have a lot of questions this morning. So from Met Services, based on what they have furnished us with, they're saying that the deficits were more pronounced in the south than in the north, where rainfall was less than 1/4 of the January average. And preliminary analysis indicates that below normal rainfall was observed across much of the island, not just at the airport stations. And of course, you have some stats here. Just go down a bit here to show. Yes, so we had here at the George F.L. Charles Airport, the long-term January average, 104.9 millimeters. January 2026 recorded 58 millimeters, a 44.5% deficit. And this ranks as the 6th driest January on record at that station. In the south, at the Hiwanora International Airport, the long-term January average was 84.7 millimeters. Only 22.2 millimeters were recorded this year so far, a 74% deficit. This makes January 2026 the 4th driest January on record in the south. Importantly, this dryness is not limited to a single month. Since the start of the water year in June 2025, rainfall totals remain well below normal. George F.L. Charles Airport is 37% below average, while Hiwanora is 34% below average for the same period. And based on current rainfall deficits and drought indicators, parts of the island, particularly in the south and the north, are trending toward meteorological drought conditions. While no formal drought has been declared this time, continued below normal rainfall through February and March would increase that risk. Reduced rainfall combined with a seasonal heat can accelerate soil moisture loss, affect agriculture, increase wildfire risk, and place added pressure on water resources. We are coordinating, that's from the Met Services, they're coordinating closely with us at Wasco, with NEMO and the WRMA, and various other agencies. Regional climate guidance suggests possible above normal rainfall between February to April and return to likely below normal rainfall activity from May to July. Therefore, the Met Services is encouraging the public to practice voluntary water conservation and remain alert for further updates. So this was extracted from the Met Services. And like I said, I apologize for Vigil Saltibus not being here with us today, but she did provide us with this information, which I will pass on to you later on. So as it stands now, she's painted a picture, a very gloomy picture of the situation. Jason Ernest, who's the director of the WRMA, will explain and provide some more stats to back this up. And of course, we will continue with our presentation from Wasco.
I just want to start off, like I did the last time, to just make mention that the Water Resources Management Agency does not produce water. Wasco takes that water and makes it potable for distribution to the population. The state owns the water resources of St. Lucia, and by that, Wasco pays an abstraction license for that commodity, as well as other entities that look to abstract our water resources. So I'd just like to make that clear. Also, in our last meeting, I did say that I hope that the weather would defy the odds and that we would have gotten some rainfall, because at the beginning of January, it was looking a bit bleak in terms of the forecast for rainfall. But from the 17th and for 3 consecutive weekends, we did receive rainfall, which contributed to the overall rainfall for the month of January. And we did see that manifest in the rise of the water level at the JCD, right? So just going back historically in terms of rainfall for the dry season and looking at December, January trends. December, January, those are the 2 months that has the highest rainfall volume. So those 2 months more or less outline what the rest of the dry season would have been. But in this case, from the wet season of last year, we've had below normal rainfalls, and coming into December, January, that trend continues. So the month of February is a very, very critical month, right, in terms of what the state of water resources is going to be in the short term, right? So if we look at our table here, and the rows that outline yellow, those were the 2 years, 2020 and 2024, where we had to declare a water-related emergency. For the most part, rainfall for the month of February has been extremely low, right? And we're already in this process where water resources is basically, the base flows are critically low, right? So at this point in time, the WRMA, we're basically in monitor mode to see exactly how that trend is going to continue. Now, like was mentioned earlier, the forecast for January, February, March did say that it was going to be a bit wetter than usual. But even if it is said that it's going to be a bit wetter than usual, it all depends on the distribution of the rainfall. If we have rainfall intensities basically grouped up together, for the hydrology of the system, it would not be advantageous. For rainwater harvesting, it would be. Also for the JCD, in some cases, it would be. But for overall long-term going into the dry season, it would not be. So we prefer the distribution to be spaced out in essence for infiltration and percolation, for the hydrology of the system to be advantageous to us. Right, so if we can see the means for January and February, for 2025, 2026, the month of December, January, we can see that it is below normal when compared to the climatological mean. So this is where we're at, and we're very thankful that we received some rainfall towards the end of January. So at our last meeting, we could have seen that the level of the JCD had started to decrease. It was way below the spillway. But with the inflows that we received, that level was able to rise. And I think the level is at around 333 feet, if I am not mistaken. So, like I say, together with Wasco and our other stakeholder agencies, we're in monitor mode at this point. Right? We know that for the other catchment areas, the situation is a bit dire, right? And one of the critical issue that we should remember is that we don't have storage capacity in terms of natural storage or artificial storage on a catchment level. This is not existent in the most part, right? So this is where we are at this moment. But if we compare to 2024, February 2024, where we had that year where we had to declare the last water-related emergency, we can see for the month of February conditions were much better than this year, right? So we did receive some rainfall that actually came into the system. So at this point in time, even if we're looking at the JCD, which is basically our bellwether in terms of monitoring our water resources, conditions were much better in that year compared to this year. So it all falls down to what the forecast is going to be. And as an agency, we are basically dependent on the rain coming into the system. And the weather is random. So we depend on the forecast, just like Wasco does, and our stakeholder partners, as to what the future conditions are going to be moving forward. So it all boils down to the infiltration and percolation, right? So you could say the largest storage, water storage we have on island is our groundwater system, right? And conditions for St. Lucia, because of our geology, are not all that great for storage, right, for groundwater storage. We do have groundwater, which maintains our base flows, but in terms of the volumes of water resources required to infiltrate so that we have such a satisfactory groundwater is very high, right? Runoff is very easy. And in the dry season, this is what we're faced with, because at this point, persons can see like the landscape is changing. We're starting to get dry, the leaves are falling, and that also relates to soil moisture. So the surface, the soil is getting a bit hard. Now, if we receive rainfall, most of that is going to be runoff, right? And water is always on the move. And in our catchment, the gradients are very high. So all of that water returns to the sea. So infiltration and percolation is very low. And that's what primarily Wasco depends on. Basically, the base flows depend on the groundwater coming into the system, right? So for rainwater harvesting, and I would just like to emphasize that, for rainwater harvesting, this is very advantageous. So whatever rainfall event we get, it's advantageous for rainwater harvesting. But at the same time, a person might see rain, and they blame Wasco, say that Wasco is not providing water, but it does not necessarily translate to their having water into the system that Wasco can use. Because in most cases, if we have high water events for a number of catchments outside the JCD, the system has to be shut down because of turbidity and so forth. So it's a very delicate system, and in terms of how we monitor and what we would like to see, like I said, the weather is random and we have no control over that. So it's just to give some other examples. So if we're looking at looking at millet, millet is a very high rainfall area. And if we're looking at 2024, 2025, we could see the distribution of rainfall for 2024 was it was very spaced, right? So rainfall, looking at it from a catchment perspective, was basically not that good, right? But for each rainfall event, somebody would be doing rainwater harvesting. That definitely would assist. And at this point, we realize that storage, everybody would tell you that storage is the issue, right? So at this point in time, we're looking that persons expand their storage capacity. So it's not only Wasco, but persons as well expand their storage capacity. Looking at it from both a rainwater harvesting perspective and also a potable water perspective. We promote rainwater harvesting in this first instance for non-potable uses, but it's critical that persons also expand their storage capacity for potable water. So if we have the two, so from the two sources, that definitely will reduce the inconvenience, right? So for 2025, we can see we had more rainfall incidences, so that definitely assisted with infiltration, kept the soil moist enough so that the water would infiltrate and go down into the groundwater reserves. So for 2025, we did not have an issue, or there was no declaration of a water-related emergency. And that's for the same period for BAF. We can see that we had more incidences of rainfall for the month of February 2025 compared to 2024. So this is what at the agency we monitor. We realize that for the dry season, we expect that. And like I say, for the months of December, January, those are the high rainfall months. And for this year, although it was below the climatological mean, it did live up to that. We did get rainfall that would more or less prepare persons, especially, and go back again, for additional alternate sources of water, which is rainwater harvesting, where they would be in a position to capture that water. But at this point in time, in the dry season, rainwater and the water available for Wasco, we're basically looking at two different processes here. So it's not if it's raining that automatically that would translate to water availability for Wasco. So it's something that we just want persons to know, right? So up to yesterday, in some of our catchments, especially in the downstream, we do have water, right? So in many instances, we do have water. But persons should be mindful that Wasco intakes are in the upstream. And I mean, that is for obvious reasons, because we all reside in a catchment, right? And you would want your water that is available for water supply to population to be of a high quality, right? So this is more or less in the upstream where you have less development, you have more of a natural environment coming into there. But the catchment area for those intakes are relatively small, right? And those are the steeper parts of the catchment. So you find that water resources in those areas would be moving rather quickly compared to downstream. So in the first instance, if you're looking at it from a catchment perspective, the upstream would be the area to go dry before the downstream. And we have many springs on island, and a lot of those springs also aid towards the inflows back into the catchments that would be available for Wasco. As an agency, well, one of our responsibilities is the characterization of our water resources and looking at additional water sources, right, for abstraction. And key to that is basically the viability of those sources. So it's basically the production of those sources in the dry season. It's not in the wet season, right? In the wet season, you'll see all the springs around the places, they're gushing water and what have you. But many of those are seasonal springs. So it's basically the productivity of those water sources in the dry season, and in many instances, those go dry. We have identified one or two that Wasco'S is aware of, and we're hoping that they could take advantage of it as quickly as possible. And just another photo just to show that there is water in the downstream, but we realize that in terms of wastewater and other activities taking place, that unfortunately it's not a viable source for Wasco in terms of making it potable. That would be extremely costly. So we are working with Wasco, and we realize that, well, we realize the complexities of our water resources, or the processes of our water resources, and what Wasco has to go through to get that water into the system for distribution. So at this point in time, I would just like to tell persons that in terms of the water resources, we're at a critical level in terms of the availability, especially where Wasco have their intakes. But I think coming out of the presentation by Dania, that for the forecast, it does say that for the first 3 months of the year, we do expect rainfall coming into the system. So we're hoping that we can have some rainfall before the situation becomes extremely dire.
As is visible from the information presented, you can see that in 2026, 2025, and the average levels of the dam were pretty much similar, with little difference showing that right now the levels are lower than what it was last year. But even that little difference is significant. Here we have a snapshot of what it's like at the different production centers up north. Again, you can see in some instances the difference in production and abstraction levels, showing that it has decreased significantly in some areas. Overall, in the Babuno area, for example, our levels of production at the Hill 20 treatment plant has gone down by 49–50%. Normally, would be producing 1.1, 1.2 million gallons of water daily from that treatment plant. Right now, our production levels are at around 400, 500,000 daily. So you can see the vast difference and the marked decline in the levels of production. This transfers to our customers, and then we have a marked deficit in the supply levels as it relates to what is needed by the customers for their daily use. We have also figures for the South, because as was mentioned, the effects of climate change right now, or the dry season, the effects are worse in the South than it is up north. And the fact that the South, the systems are small rural systems, whatever effect will be felt even greater than when you're dealing with a larger system like the John Compton Dam or the Hill 20, from the Hill 20 plant. So you can see the figures we have there for the Patience area, the Micoud treatment plant, and they all show marked declines from what it was for the same time last year. In some instances, the drop in the levels of production at our facilities in the rural communities or the southern communities is from 15 to as much as 55%.
Okay, this is the gravity intake, and normally water would be running over this thing, covering everything everywhere I'm standing there now. But this is what we have there. So where I'm standing there, I'm standing in the middle of the river. And as you could see, there's no water around me anywhere at all. And that river will be going downstream like this. The pipe is actually running in the river. The pipe that you could see there, it's actually running in the river. And what we have here now is a dry riverbed. Now let me go up a little further to show you. Okay. This is the pipe coming out of the intake. So as you could see here, everything that is coming down from up there, every drop of water goes there, and Wasco is picking up everything, so there's nothing more that we can get out of the gravity.
Okay, so the area that we just demonstrated there, that's the gravity intake. This source actually helps with what we get from the JCD. Normally we get about between 2 to 3 million gallons of water on a good day. A normal dry season, it will go down to at least 1 million gallons of water. And that would help us with what we're getting from the dam. However, as is very much visible here, because we took this video earlier this week, you can see the condition of that area right now. And this is a mirror image of what's happening to a lot of the different intakes down south. You have intakes, for example, in Soze, in Choiseul, that's almost dry. A while ago, we saw a few rivers, for example, the Canaries River. There are 3 or 4 rivers in St. Lucia. Even through the worst dry seasons, these rivers stay active. Canaries being one, that's one we saw a while ago. But a lot of the other areas, for example, as I said, the levels in the river, the levels of possible abstraction of water from these rivers have gone down from 15 to 55%. And it's a situation that's very alarming to us, because normally you'd get one area going down so you could substitute by taking water, trucking water from another area to that area. But when you have everything going down in that way, it's a situation that calls for serious attention. Coupled with the problems of the dry season, we had some damages to the raw water line. So on the 5th of February, we went in to repair 3 major leaks on the raw water line. These leaks came about the week before. In attending to these 3 leaks, it took us a period of about 40 hours from the morning of February 5th to the night of February 7th. However, on completion of these works, when we reopen the system, the additional pressures placed on the already compromised raw water line resulted in another 2 major damages. These damages we sent our crews back and repair, and was done within a period of 12 hours, I believe, and the water was restored. It will take some time for every citizen in the north of the island to get a supply of water, because we can imagine for a period of 3 days, our distribution lines went dry. Our storage tanks went dry. So first of all, even the raw water line taking the water from the JCD dam to our treatment plant went dry. So first of all these lines have to be recharged. Persons might say a small line, but some of these lines are 24 inches in diameter. Some are 20 inches in diameter and run for kilometers. If you have to put all these lines together and stack them up, cut them into pieces and stack them up side by side, we're talking about millions of gallons of water. So first of all, these lines have to be charged. After these lines are charged, and only then can persons start receiving a supply. Apart from that, because of our geology, you find persons living at different elevations. Our lines have to run according to our road network. So persons living at high elevations, it would take even longer, because when the water gets to your neighbors below, whatever they fill in has to get filled before the pressures then can push the water up. And so it's a slow process, and some persons find it difficult to deal with. We understand that. We actually have intensified our tracking to ensure that we can get water to these affected areas, the most affected areas. However, I want to explain something to you. Even with the trucking, if you continue taking water from the bottom to bring to the top, it takes even longer for the supply to reach the extremities. But it's something that we understand, and we understand the plight of these persons, so it's something that we have to do. So just asking the public to bear a little to ensure that, but we're going to ensure that everybody gets a supply in due time. We have some pictures there. You can see some of the work that was done. The photo actually shows one of the first damages that's in a concrete box we have in the forest. And this was very difficult because the pressures the line was under also. It was very risky for our workers, but it was handled. Now, I want to talk about I mentioned some of it already, the short-term relief mechanisms that we have put in place. One would be community valving. We're doing that island-wide. Trucking, also island-wide. And we have gone on an intensive leak campaign, so we're asking the public also to help in by sending information on leaks or any water wastage they're seeing, so that we can take advantage of that information and do these repairs. The trucking affects the entire country because we actually have to take from places where, I'm not saying that they have extra, but where they have more than other places and move around. It's actually more of like sharing what little resource we have. The medium to long-term relief would be some of our initiatives that are coming up, which I will allow Mr. Norville to take care of.
I'm Maurice Norville, and I'm the head of Wasco'S Project Management Unit. As was mentioned in the previous presentations, Wasco is faced with a lot of challenges on two fronts. One being the condition of the climate right now and the impact it is having on our water resources. And the second is on the condition of our infrastructure as it stands. So in terms of the climate aspect, there's nothing much that we can do in terms of we can't ask for rain to fall when we want it. But what we can do is to address some of the infrastructural challenges which we are faced with. And we have a number of projects which we have already commenced that seek to alleviate some of the pressures which we are facing as it pertains to the condition of our infrastructure. So the first project I would like to speak about is the raw water pipeline replacement project. As Mr. King mentioned, the current pipeline is rather aged and it's in a very vulnerable state, and it requires urgent attention, not in the form of just repairs, but it requires replacement. So we have already sourced funding for the replacement of 5 kilometers of that pipeline, going from Millet to Varna, and we're in the pre-construction phase of that project. So currently, we are building out our project team, which will include a community liaison officer, a project engineer, and a consulting firm who will undertake the supervision of the works. So we're currently in the process of procuring those personnel. After which we will move on to the contracting phase. So we will hire a contractor who will actually do the execution of those works. Another area which we are working on is our Thibault treatment plant, which is our primary treatment plant for the production of potable water to the north of the island. So the raw water which comes from the JCD system is transmitted to the Thibault treatment plant, which also requires some upgrades. Because currently there are 10 filters in place, but a number of them are not working at optimal efficiency, and that is something which we need to remedy quite soon. So currently, we have started with an environmental and social impact assessment. I should mention that the funding for this project is through the CARICOM Development Fund. So in collaboration with them, a consultant has been hired to do the environmental and social impact assessment. We will be doing some stakeholder consultations commencing next week. So you'll look out for the notices on that, where we will be going to our different stakeholders, government agencies, commercial entities, and also the residents of the community, where we will brief them on the project, take into account their concerns, and we'll look to move forward to the implementation of that project. Also, we want to address some of the NRW issues which we are faced with, or I should elaborate, non-revenue water. And specifically, one initiative which we are going to be taking on very soon is the replacement of a section of the northern pipeline. So we did phase 1 a couple of years ago from Monjiro up to the Bonte Gap, but that needs to be extended to the Groseley Gap. So that will commence as soon as next month. We're just currently finalizing the contract agreements in terms of the consultancy for the supervision, as well as the contracting firm who will be actually doing the execution of those works. Another project which is already on stream is the Pasias Water Supply Redevelopment Project. So this is a significant upgrade to the system which currently exists in Pasias Miku, where we will be doing a new intake, a new pumping station, and also there will be a new treatment plant. So that will greatly improve our production of water to the area of Pasias and its environs. So currently we're approximately 30% complete in terms of the construction of the pump house, 60% complete on the construction of the intake, and the civil works for the treatment plant are approximately 80% complete. Once the civil works for the treatment plant have been completed, we will be doing the installation of the treatment plant, which is actually being manufactured currently in Europe and will be shipped in the next about 2 months. And I have some photos of the progress on the overall project just to share with you. So this one here is a photo of the first level of the pump house, which is under construction on the near to the Fall River in Miku. And here we have some photos of the location for the intake. So that is also under construction. It's advanced since the taking of this photo. So we actually have some concrete works which have already been done on this site. And just to show you some of the pictures of the treatment plants, which is currently at the factory in Europe, and is set to be shipped in, as I said, within the next 2 months. So just want to share some of the photos from that. And here is just one picture of the progress which is being made on the treatment plant site as well. So this is where what we would call the admin building or the operators' quarters would be. So at that location is where the treatment plants and the other facilities the other ancillary activities for the treatment plants will be undertaken. So that's pretty much it for updates as it relates to projects and initiatives which we are undertaking, and these are just the major ones. Of course, we have our normal operational activities which we continue to do on a daily basis, but we wanted to just share with you some of the capital projects which we are currently engaged in.
The supplies have been depleted. Climate change is very active. It's taken its toll on us at this time, and a lot of our water sources are dry. So we have our rivers are dry, both in the north and the south. Most of the catchments this is where we collect our water. These catchments, as you could have seen in the footage, there is simply no water. So with climate change affecting us, I would say the position currently is very bleak. But I'm sure that the next question will be, how then are we hoping to manage it? So this is why the entire team is here, because we're really looking towards the management of the resource, because at the end of the day, although there is no water, it's limited in a lot of areas. Mr. King alluded to the fact that canneries and a few other systems may have, but the supply is not enough for the entire island. So persons may then want to ask, what next? It's a necessity. Our caption is water is life. So we then have to try to manage the resource, which is what we're doing now. So we look currently at valving. So with the valving, we would be able to share the resource amongst the different communities. And of course, we look at the water trucking. Water trucking has become a thing for us, like we were speaking about it yesterday. And it simply is that you take from one area, which may be as far as Viewfort, and of course, in some instances, Ancillary and Dennery, and you try to share that limited resource with the others in the other communities.
If we had to remain in this position, when do you suspect that we consider we are critical?
Well, we as Wasco cannot determine when a water-related emergency or a drought is really identified. We're not the agency that's responsible for that. So that would be the WRMA, Water Resources Management Agency. And I guess they would do that in collaboration with the Met Office. And I'm pretty sure NEMO would probably be a partner in that as well. And at that stage, when they determine we have not had enough rainfall for a particular period, that is when we would declare a drought. But we can say to St. Lucia currently, obviously, that this is a dry spell. So we're in a very dry period, and we need to push the message of conservation.
Just to push the point a little bit, the Prime Minister on Monday alluded to possibility of importing water from Dominica. Again, I guess the other gentleman can address it if he wishes. When do we get to that point?
Okay, so that would be when all of our supplies are depleted and we simply do not have enough to share. I think way back in 2010 it was, in 2010, yeah. in 2010, we were very close to that. We had even almost gotten the barges prepared, and we had had conversations, of course, with the government in Dominica. But thankfully, we didn't have to go that route.
A question for me, Tony Nicholas, and Russia Times. We heard recently pronouncements from the Prime Minister about Wasco'S dire financial situation. I wanted to put that in context of, I heard several presenters mention the fact that Wasco had to truck water. Has that placed an additional financial burden on Wasco? And just kind of put that into context in terms of what does it cost in Wasco in terms of having to truck water over the last few weeks and earlier in the year?
Yeah. Okay, so yes, the trucking of water is very, very costly. As you would imagine, it is movement of water from one locality to the next. So you have a number of truckers, and we ourselves, we also have our own trucks. So whereas we have our own trucks, we cannot supply the number of customers. So we then have to go to supply using private truckers. And that is where the cost really comes in, when we have to now pay private truckers to take water to our customers. And the region, I would say it's in the region of $1 million to $1.2 million a year for us to be able to do the trucking. And you may also appreciate that that figure could increase depending on the number of emergencies or emergency maintenance works that we have to do. So the more maintenance works we have to do is the more trucking we have to do. So that figure could also increase.
How do you manage that distribution, bearing in mind that you now have to satisfy not just private households, but you have a number of businesses and hotels, particularly in the north of the island? How do you manage that resource in terms of distributing that water by your trucking means?
So thankfully, the hotels, I must say, they have been very cooperative, and we actually do not truck on a normal day to hotels. The hotels do their own private trucking. So we are able to focus specifically on our domestic customers. So the commercial customers also do their own private trucking. So that really lifts the burden, on Wasco. And I must commend them, honestly, because they've been very, very cooperative. They manage their own trucking of water. So we don't need to do that for them.
Chelsea Austin, NBC Television. Hi. I was a bit late, but my question actually focuses on investment. Where are you guys right now with securing investors? And that will have to deal with, of course, the maintenance of the pipes and upgrading the entire system.
Okay, so we have different systems, and we must be very mindful that the persons in the north, I think those persons, they're very affluent, so their usage is a lot more. So I suspect that you're probably dealing with, your question is related to the north and the northern pipeline, which is where, we have been. So for the northern pipeline, there's a number of things that we have to do. So there's a number of projects that we're working on just to ensure sustainability in the north. So we alluded to the 5 kilometers of raw water pipeline, which needs to be replaced. So that is the first project. After that, we spoke about the Thebes treatment plant project. So you would appreciate that when the water leaves the John Compton Dam, it has to be treated before we can distribute it to the public. So our second project would be the upgrade of the Thebes treatment plant, because currently that treatment plant, when it was designed for 10 filters, but only 4 are operating optimally this point. So that's the second project. And the third project to alleviate the woes of the people in the north would be the northern pipeline, which is the upgrade of the pipeline from Bonte Gap right through to Grosile. So these are our 3 major projects.
But have you guys secured investors to handle those projects?
Yes, we actually have. For the raw water pipeline, which is the first one, we have a CDB loan in the amount of, close to $54 million for that. So we are working with the governments of St. Lucia. They are going to be the ones to support us on that. For the Thebes treatment plant, we have secured the funds from the CDF, which is another 5.4 million US dollars. And for the northern pipeline, we've secured funds currently from the Bank of St. Lucia. So as you can see, we're almost everywhere trying to get funds, right? So we have 3 major funding agencies that are hoping to support us on those projects.
So in that vein, does that mean that Wasco, I know Wasco is they are right now undertaking a serious for increase in Morocco rates. I know there's an ongoing debate. Does that mean that's very needed for Wasco getting an increase?
Well, I don't really want to touch too much on the increase, and I'll tell you why. Because all Wasco has done is submitted an application to the NERC. So currently, we're in the process of the consultations. So persons right now can provide their feedback on what they believe should be the situation with the rate increases for Wasco. So we just actually came out of a whole week of consultations throughout the island, and we made our case. So to answer your question, yes, I do believe that the rate increase is needed. But for us to speak more as to what the percentages are and whether or not we are indeed going to get that rate increase, it will be a little premature for me to speak about that at this time.
Miriam, on to DBS television. Not sure if you can answer this because, as you said, you don't want to make too many pronouncements. But we know that there's three tires, I believe, for the water rate increase. Which one of those tires would be the most feasible to ensure that we don't end up in a serious financial crisis later down the line where Wasco is concerned?
Okay, so the 3 tiers really, I think you probably have it a little mixed up. So we have different categories, and then in each category, we have the different tiers. So in the domestic category, for example, we have the first tier, which is 0 to 2,000 gallons of water. That is going to be heavily subsidized, I should say, because that is the rate, the lowest rate. So currently, that is the rate where persons pay $24.42 for that. Anything thereafter, so anything after the 2,000 gallons of water, the rate increases significantly to $12.21 per 1,000 gallons, which is what is happening right now. So the tier system is really to support the underprivileged and the persons at the lower level of the poverty line. Yeah.
Yes, very much so. This is an incident that we're investigating. We contacted the Department of Infrastructure for the engineers to find out basically what construction agency was operating in the area. But also, we also partner with Environmental Health, DCA, Ministry of Planning. So part of our mandate is, like I mentioned, environmental protection. So it's monitoring the activities that may be detrimental to water resources and partnering with the appropriate agencies that have the mandate to take action. So this is one of the incidences that we are aware of, and we're actually doing some investigation to see exactly and monitoring the situation. And I'm happy that you brought up that point, because in this day and age, persons still see the river as a dumping ground. And as mentioned earlier, that is why Wasco has the intakes high up in the catchment, basically to avoid some of those activities that are taking place in the downstream. We have taken some actions with some waste and wastewater pollution that has happened in the recent past. So this is something that is definitely ongoing. So in terms of the water quality aspect, of the water resources, the WRMA is heavily involved in that. And I just want to just add on to the question that was asked of the CEO. Overall in St. Lucia, we still receive satisfactory rainfall, right? We still get good rainfall, but most of that rainfall goes to the sea based on, our conditions, like I say, lack of storage. So it's basically water on demand. When we want that water has already left the system. Rainfall ranges from 500 to over 3,000 millimeters a year in certain areas. And if you look at the based on Wasco'S current water production activities, that would equate to probably less than 25 millimeters, right? So we know that the demand is much greater, right, than the supply at times. So that's where it is in terms of having that water when you need that water. So the water comes into the system and it easily goes to the sea or it gets evaporated. So that's why we encourage persons, because of those rainfalls, as an additional source of water, to move into rainwater harvesting, because the effect is immediate. And in the dry season, unfortunately is disadvantageous to the operations of Wasco. Even if we get good rainfall incidences, it does not automatically translate to Wasco receiving those waters in the rivers and streams, especially like was mentioned in the south, because many times those systems have to be shut down, so those high water flows just pass over and goes to the sea. So by the time you have the base flows, you have the laminar flows for abstraction, that water supply is basically there only for a limited period of time. So conditions in the wet season as to the dry season is very different. But for rainwater harvesting, and we're looking at building resilience, this is the easiest and one of the quickest short-term solutions to build resilience in the water sector, whether it's in the wet season or the dry season. So as an agency, and part of our responsibility is the promoting water conservation, is to encourage persons who are not yet into rainwater harvesting to start to put in implement those measures, put in the infrastructure for that. And for persons who are already doing it, based on your activities and in terms of the incidences of not receiving water from the utility, or also in terms of the area where you live, depending on the rainfall situation, to augment your storage capacity so that to reduce the inconvenience to the household. So we speak specifically for the household, but we're also looking at business places as well, because there is something that we can do. It's unfortunate some of what is taking place, but then there are still solutions, and the quickest solution for each and every one of us is to include rainwater harvesting into our water conservation measures.
Actually, Mr. Norville has been chartered with the responsibility to sort of develop a plan so that we can share with the public. So we're actually looking to see whether or not we can have a model. So with that model, we can share with the public so that they will be able to institute rainwater harvesting measures into their normal domestic systems. Yes, so we are working on that. And as soon as that is done, we will be able to provide more data on it, and we'll be able to share it. And we do have some rainwater harvesting projects that we have been successful at doing in the Millet region as well. So that's something that we will want to duplicate.
Question, Valencia GIS. On a sore point,
I should have stayed in my seat.
we know that Wasco undertook the desilting at the John Compton Dam. and that didn't go as it should have. Where would we have been if that had gone the way it would have? Is there anything to determine where we would have been at that point? And is there any plan moving forward to going back to the desilting of the dam?
Yeah, well, I can't really speak to where we would have been. Yeah, that's a tough one. But yes, we do have measures to go back to the dredging. And I think what we need to probably recognize as well is that, yes, the dredging exercise took place as a project, but the dredging of the JCD cannot be a project. It has to be a maintenance regime. So when we do go back into it, it would be a matter of us having the equipment belonging to us and constantly and consistently dredging of the dam. Yeah?
Would you be able to tell us what percentage of silt is in the dam right now?
No, we don't know what percentage is in the dam. We know that approximately 8% of it was removed in the last dredging, but to be able to say what is currently there, no, we don't have that data right now. Because you would also appreciate that with every rain event since then, more and more silt comes in. So it would be a little difficult. Yeah.
To the question that you asked, sediment transport in our rivers is very high, and one can appreciate that you would create the infrastructure more or less to capture water, but then after one rainfall event, it is just completely filled with silt. So that means you always have that maintenance regime of removing the silt, because in terms of the capacity, the capacity gets reduced extremely quickly. And also, like I tell persons, in St. Lucia, let's say we're building a dam for $1 million, and in some other country, the same $1 million, you would be able to create a reservoir probably a few miles upstream in some of those other countries, whereas in St. Lucia, in many cases, you only go in maybe 200 meters or 100 meters, and if you don't have inflow, especially in the dry season, Wasco can abstract that water in less than 30 minutes. So these are all the things that needs to be taken into consideration, because, like I say, our catchments are pretty small, and our terrain is very steep. So even if you put the infrastructure, you have to take into consideration basically the capacity that you're building behind those, and also in terms of the geology as well. So are you more or less saturating the soil where now you're creating landslides and you're filling it with silt? So all of those things has to be taken into consideration, and these are where the complexities are. And we as an agency, we understand that, because we do have instrumentation on the rivers, and trying to get the data sometimes is extremely difficult because of the dynamic nature of our rivers. So that's why as an agency, we always support Wasco, because we understand what Wasco is going through, and I always tell persons that those workers, I mean, they go way over and beyond to get things done, but unfortunately, persons who are not involved or out in the field do not appreciate or do not see what is happening, because it is a very complex process based on our small island state. Yeah.
CNS, what measures are there in place to protect the catchment areas?
Okay, so thank you for that. So as an agency, I would say our baseline, when we're looking at the environmental protection, in the first instance, is the location of Wasco intakes. So everything that is taking place above those intakes. So you'd understand, above the intakes, we have the forest reserve, but around the forest reserve, We also have forested lands, but those are like private lands, right? So in terms of having the land use policy, outside of having the land use policy, we always have to investigate the activities that are taking place. And like I said earlier, do the investigation. We normally create a multidisciplinary investigative team with other agencies to go out into the field to basically investigate what's happening. So it may be the same thing to that maybe there might be a development, but the DCA would contact the agency basically as to let us know what is the intent or what persons are looking to do, and then we do the investigation. So at the WRMA, our baseline is in function of where Wasco intakes are, and this is something that we're at the point of sending that information to DCA. So in the first instance, they don't really need to call us because they will have based on the parcel, the block and parcel number, and where the block and parcel number upstream of Wasco intakes. So that would flag so as to contact the agency, okay, well, such and such, so that the appropriate measures can be taken, or basically the conversation should start with that. So this is the starting point that the agency is working with.